Hello, it's Wednesday, September the 7th. I'm Hwang Jae, and this is Business Daily Live from Seoul. We have a lot on our program today, but let's first take a look at today's highlights. A U.S. court gives Hangzhou Shipping temporary bankruptcy protection so the company's vessels can dock at American ports without fears of being seized. Korea's population shoots past the 50 million mark, but with seniors leading the population growth, concerns mount over the country losing its economic dynamism. We start with the latest developments from Hangzhou Shipping. A court in the United States has granted interim bankruptcy protection for Korea's shipping giant. While back in Seoul, officials scramble to contain the potential spillover from the Hangzhou disaster. Kim Jung-soo tells us more.
The U.S. Bankruptcy Court in Newark, New Jersey has authorized temporary protection for Hangzhou just 4 days after the shipping giant filed its application. The move will prevent U.S. creditors from taking legal action against Hangzhou ships and other assets, while the company undergoes restructuring in Korea. But this does not mean Hangzhou containers will reach their destinations anytime soon, as major ports and truckers have refused to unload and transport cargo from the troubled shipper, fearing they will not be able to secure payments. As a result, over 80 Hangzhou ships worldwide carrying 500,000 containers are currently stranded at sea, leaving hundreds of American retailers nearly empty-handed ahead of the fast-approaching holiday season. To receive a final order on bankruptcy protection, Hangzhou representatives will have to return to court on Friday. Back in Korea, Seoul's Maritime Ministry has projected the company will need over 650 billion won, or $590 million, to successfully unload all of its ships and satisfy overdue financial obligations. The country's finance minister, Yoo Il-ho, in a meeting this afternoon, is expected to discuss the government's role in minimizing losses in the maritime industry and economy as a whole caused by Hangzhou's demise. Under current plans, the Trade Ministry and related agencies will focus on finding alternative service providers for companies that had originally planned to use Hangzhou to transport their goods. Kim Jung-soo, Business Daily.
LG Electronics has unveiled its new premium smartphone as it looks to revive its struggling handset sector. The V20, introduced in Seoul and San Francisco, is the first smartphone to run on Google's latest Android mobile operating system called Nougat and adopt Google's new search application in-apps. The V20 features dual-lens rear cameras and high-end audio functions. LG suffered disappointing sales with its G5 smartphone earlier this year, posting its fifth straight quarterly operating loss in the second quarter. In-store sales of the V20 are expected to begin later this month. World leaders had a wealth of issues to discuss at the G20 summit, which wrapped up earlier this week, but at the very forefront was global low-growth woes. Korea, which is heavily dependent on exports, is not an exception from these concerns, especially as it juggles with fundamental problems at home like a rapidly graying population.
Korea's population has topped 50 million as of November last year, up nearly 3% from 5 years ago. A report from Statistics Korea shows it's been 30 years since the population first reached the 40 million mark in 1985. It also offers a very different picture when it comes to the country's changing demographics. While the overall population has been on the rise, the number of children aged 14 and under dropped 2.3% last year from 2010. The number of elderly at 65 and above, on the other hand, rose 2.2%, accounting for more than 1/10 of the total population. An aging society like this means a tighter state budget, and coupled with a dwindling working population, this altogether spells trouble for economic growth. Korea's aging society has long been cited as one of the risks challenging the economy, notably with Fitch Ratings calling it one of the 3 major threats to growth. This is also why critics say short-term stimulus policies like monetary easing and extra budgets cannot be a cure-all for the country when it comes to escaping a looming low growth trap.
And for more on the aging population trend and what it means for the economy, we are joined by Professor Shin Se-don from Sookmyung Women's University. Thanks for joining us, Professor.
You're welcome.
So it was briefly mentioned in the report that we just saw, but how does an aging society lead to an economic slowdown?
Well, generally, aging society is believed to get a slower economic growth because there will be a smaller proportion of people working in the market, and as the older people are not working, naturally they wouldn't have enough money to spend. So smaller portion of people not working and smaller money income for them to spend, and that is the main reason for slower growth. But historically, across the country and across the world, if I check the number of countries, and actually, in the case of United States and most of the European country, when there has been very fast pace of becoming aging society, but economic growth didn't turn down. So the only exception may be Japan, because in the case of Japan, very high pace of aging society and on top of a very slow pace of economic growth. So Japan may be the exception, but generally it is, I think, you can't quite find the relationship between aging society and the slow economic growth.
But how serious is the issue here in Korea, which has one of the fastest aging populations?
Really, for the Japan, from the aging society, it took 24 years, but in the case of Korea, 18 years. And from aging society, aged society to ultra-aged society, Japan, it took 24 years. I don't know how fast it will be, but definitely Korea is the fastest in becoming aged society, and we can't deny that.
But you just mentioned that aging population might not be directly linked to an economic slowdown, but still it's a threat coupled with the snowballing household debt problem.
Right.
And the government has laid out measures to trying very hard to rev up the domestic demand. What measures do you think the government should take to address the issue?
Basically, two things. We have to give more jobs for the elderly people to participate in economic activity. In the 65 years, pretty old in a past standard, but now I think even 75 years old, I think should be young enough to work. So we have to give more opportunity for them to have works, and on the other hand, we should give more income, monetary income, for them to spend. So other than the 200,000 won kind of pension for the elderly people, we should provide more jobs and more income for them to spend. And that is the crucial policy that the government should follow.
But many say that, including Korea's top central banker, that these kind of measures that you just mentioned, the government measures, should be a long-term one, that they need more time and that it should be applied to multiple administrations. What does Korea need to set its long-term goals?
Well, actually, the government have been trying to, solve the problem with the wage peak system and work sharing program, early retirement, and subsidies for nursing kids, and in order to increase the birth rate. But the government has spent a tremendous amount of money, and at least so far it didn't work out. So that's really true. We have to have a long, kind of a long-term project, and I think the aging society is not an aim. It's kind of it's a blessing for. So becoming an aging society is kind of a blessing for us, and the only trouble is we have to take care of them, and we have to give them some, works, give them some money to spend. So government has to take care of the elderly people and try to give jobs and to try to give monetary income other than pension. I think that is the crucial thing.
It's interesting that you call aging population a blessing. I mean, especially when there are so much concern about Korea following the footsteps of Japan, like the one that you just mentioned earlier. Are we seeing a protracted low growth trend in that we are concerned that we're following the footsteps of Japan?
The low growth in Korea isn't because of the aging society. Aging society, you find it in many European countries, United States, Australia, New Zealand, and in almost all European cases, aging society is coupled with very high economic growth. Only one exception, I think, is Japan. So it doesn't necessarily follow that aging society becomes slower in economic growth. So I think we could find the real reason for slow economic growth in Korea here is not because of aging society, it is because of something else. I think the key point is very slow export performances. So at the center, I think export is the solution to that. So as long as the government solves the problem of slow growth in export, I think every other problem would be solved naturally and automatically.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Professor.
You're welcome.
A tax on tobacco products meant to discourage smoking continues to have the opposite effect. According to estimates from the Korea Taxpayers Association, the government stands to collect more than 13 trillion won or $12 billion in cigarette taxes this year. That's more than double what the government had projected when it first introduced the raised cigarette prices at the start of last year. And the demand will likely continue to grow into next year. A finance ministry report issued to Parliament today said it's expecting a 5.4% increase in contributions to a national health promotion fund from cigarette taxes in 2017 on year. With an anti-bribery law set to take effect soon after Korea's Thanksgiving holiday, Chuseok, many retailers are coming up with new packaging strategies to keep presents below the legal price cap. Despite this, many industries are expected to see massive losses. Our Lee Ju-young has more.
Gift sets for Chuseok this year are looking a lot smaller. Yellow corvinas come in strings of 3 instead of the usual 10 to 20, and customers can now make their own fruit baskets at major retailers like Lotte Department Store. The idea is to put out more lower-priced gifts below the 50,000 won mark, or roughly $45 in response to an anti-graft law set to take effect later this month.
Ahead of implementation, we expect to see more consumers looking for practical gifts.
While the idea behind the so-called Kim영란 Act is to tackle corruption, the price caps on meals and gifts that can be offered to public servants and journalists comes with its own set of problems. The Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs says it expects sales in the farming, fisheries and livestock industries to see one of the largest drops ahead of Chuseok, a time when many send out expensive gift sets. It estimates the law will cause demand for beef sets to slide by some $219 million, with about 93% of the gift sets being priced over the legal limit. Korea Economic Research Institute also projects that restaurants, gift-related industries, and country clubs are expected to see their profits fall by several billion dollars annually once the law goes into effect on September 28. While the central government decided not to heed advice on raising the price limits, the State Commission on Anti-Corruption says changes can be made down the line if deemed necessary after the law goes through a test run through 2018. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
And And that's it for this edition of Business Daily. Hope you've enjoyed it. I'm Hangzhou. Do stay tuned to Arirang for business news updates and more, and goodbye for now.